They said she was too small to be a real threat. Staff Sergeant Garrett Morrison announced it loud enough for the whole training pit to hear. His voice carried across the red Georgia clay like a challenge written in the air itself. 28-year-old Captain Maya Blackwood stood motionless in the center of the combatives' ring at Fort Moore's Maneuver Center of Excellence. Her Army combat uniform was already dark with sweat in the September afternoon heat. 3 male soldiers circled her like wolves who had cornered something they did not understand. They saw a compact woman, 5'4", someone who had somehow landed in their modern Army combatives Level 4 instructor course. What they could not see was the small dragon silhouette tattooed on her inner right wrist, a mark no bigger than a quarter. A mark that told a story none of them would believe. What they could not know was that in 72 hours, Morrison would be on his back in that same ring, staring at the Georgia sky, wondering what he had just tried to fight. But that comes later. The afternoon sun beat down on the training area behind Building 4. Heat shimmered off the tin roofs of the surrounding complex. The smell of pine sap mixed with sweat and dust. That particular perfume of military installations in the deep south. The combatives' ring was a 20-foot square of packed dirt, bordered by weathered railroad ties, surrounded by bleachers where a dozen soldiers sat with crossed arms and expressions that said they had already made up their minds about what they were seeing. This is where it begins, not with the fight, with the arrival. 72 hours earlier, Maya had stepped off a commercial bus at the Fort Moore main gate, a single rucksack slung over one shoulder, moving with an economy of motion that some mistook for hesitation. It was actually the careful stillness of someone who had learned that wasted movement could cost lives. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight regulation bun. It revealed a lean face marked by sharp cheekbones and a thin scar that cut through her left eyebrow. The scar was from Afghanistan. Most of her important memories were. She was small, compact, built like a distance runner rather than a brawler. Men always made assumptions about that. Her uniform showed its age, faded operational camouflage pattern from too many field rotations. Sleeves rolled precisely to mid-forearm according to regulation. On her right inner wrist, barely visible unless you knew to look, was that dragon tattoo. When she thought no one was watching, her left thumb would press against it, just for a second, like checking a touchstone to make sure it was still there. Around her neck, hidden beneath her undershirt, hung 2 sets of dog tags. Neither set was hers. Command Sergeant Major Raymond Thorne stood near the company headquarters building when she arrived, clipboard in hand, jaw working a piece of gum. He was 62 years old, 40 years in service. He had seen enough soldiers to know when something did not add up. Maya's service record showed standard infantry time, a deployment to Afghanistan in 2020 and 2021, and then 14 months of entries marked simply as training specialized program before her reassignment stateside. The classification markers on those entries were the kind that made people stop asking questions. Thorne tried asking once, in the informal way senior NCOs have of gathering information without making it official. She had smiled politely and changed the subject so smoothly he almost did not notice it happening. Across the training area that first morning stood Staff Sergeant Garrett Morrison and his crew. Morrison was 32 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds, built like someone who had spent his entire adult life in the gym. He had earned his Ranger tab the hard way. He carried a combat infantryman badge on his chest. He moved through the world like he owned whatever ground his boots touched. His training partners were Sergeant Marcus Webb and Specialist Kyle Bennett. Webb was shorter, thicker, 30 years old. The kind of man who followed stronger personalities because it was easier than thinking for himself. Bennett was lean and wary, 22 years old, still new enough to the Army that he thought aggression was the same as competence. They had been circling Maya since the morning formation, making comments just loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Morrison kept calling her the diversity quota, Webb laughed at every joke like it was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Bennett watched her the way someone watches an animal they are planning to corner, waiting to see if it would run or fight. What none of them knew was that Maya had already fought this fight 100 times in her mind, in a dozen different variations, and she had won every single one. The story does not start at Fort Moore. It starts earlier, in places most of these soldiers had never been, doing things that officially never happened. But before that, it starts in Seattle, 14 years earlier. In a garage that smelled like motor oil and old leather, a different version of Maya was learning the fundamentals of a different kind of war. The rain hammered on the roof of the detached garage behind the small house in Seattle's Rainier Valley neighborhood. Maya Blackwood was 14 years old, wearing sweatpants and a tank top, bare feet on the cold concrete floor. Her father demonstrated a defensive technique for the third time, with the patience of someone who understood that real learning could not be rushed. Master Sergeant Thomas Blackwood, United States Marine Corps, retired. He was 58 years old that year. He had served from 1980 to 1996. Force reconnaissance. With a combat deployment to Desert Storm that he rarely talked about in specific terms, but which had left him with a slight limp in his left leg and a medical retirement that came earlier than he had wanted. His hands were scarred from a vehicle fire during the war, thick calluses across the palms, but they moved with surprising gentleness as he adjusted Maya's stance. "Your weight is too far forward," he said. His voice carried that particular quality of men who had spent years giving orders in combat zones, not loud, but absolutely clear. "You commit too early. They will read it and counter. Stay neutral until you are ready to move." Maya adjusted, shifted her weight back, centered herself. Thomas nodded once, then moved in slow motion through the technique again. It was a basic wrist release. The kind of thing that looks simple until you try to do it under pressure, against someone bigger and stronger. He had been teaching her since she was 12, first the basic movements, then the principles, then the philosophy underneath it all. "In my war," Thomas said, stepping back and gesturing for her to try it on him, "we learned something important. In the places we operated, we could not access half the population, women, children. They had intelligence we needed, medical needs we could have helped with, but we were all men, and their culture would not allow it." He paused. "Let that sink in. That was our blind spot. We lost people because of it." Maya executed the wrist release, breaking his grip, creating distance. Thomas smiled slightly. "Future wars," he continued, "will not be like the old ones. They will need warriors like you, soldiers who can go places men cannot, do things men cannot do. You will be what we needed and did not have." "You think there will be women in combat?" Maya asked, resetting her stance. "I know there will be," Thomas said. "Question is whether they will be properly trained, whether they will be respected, whether the institution will be ready for them." "And if it is not?" Thomas looked at her with those steady gray eyes that had seen things he would never fully describe. "Then you be so good they cannot ignore you, earn everything twice, and when your moment comes, you seize it without hesitation." That philosophy would carry her further than she could imagine that rainy afternoon. The defining moment came 3 years later. Maya was 17, 3 male classmates, all seniors. All bigger than her by 50 pounds or more. They cornered her behind the school gym after a basketball game. They had been drinking, which made them bold and stupid in equal measure. They thought she was an easy target, a small girl walking alone in the dark. They were very wrong. The first one grabbed her arm. She broke his nose with a palm strike to the face, using the technique Thomas had drilled into her 1,000 times. The second one rushed in. She used his momentum, turned her hip, threw him over her leg in a basic osotogari sweep that sent him hard into the pavement. The third one hesitated. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was thinking he could grab her from behind. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, hooked his leg, took him down, and had him in an arm lock before he understood what was happening. Thomas found her 5 minutes later, standing calm near the 3 boys who were still trying to figure out what had hit them. One was holding his bleeding nose. One was curled up trying to breathe. One was cradling his arm where the joint had been stressed almost to the breaking point. Thomas looked at the scene, looked at his daughter, and said nothing for a long moment. "Come with me," he finally said. They drove in silence to the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall on the south side of town. Maya had been there before, dropping off her father for meetings, picking him up after events, but she had never been inside during one of their gatherings. Thomas led her through the door into the main room where 3 older men sat around a table playing cards. They all looked up when Thomas entered with Maya. There was something in his expression that made them set down their cards without question. "Gentlemen," Thomas said, "my daughter just put 3 grown men on the ground behind her high school, used techniques I taught her, did it without panic, without hesitation, without losing control. I think it is time you met her properly." The 3 men stood. Maya recognized them from neighborhood gatherings, 4th of July barbecues, the kind of community events where veterans tended to cluster together. Speaking their own language of shared experience, Gunnery Sergeant Patrick O'Sullivan retired. He was 68 years old that year. He had served with the Marines, Force Recon, deployed to Desert Storm in 1990 when he was 31. He was tall, lean, still moved like a man who could cover ground quickly when needed. His specialty had been marksmanship and small unit tactics. Chief Warrant Officer Warren Kowalski retired. He was 66, Army Special Forces, 5th Group, Desert Storm veteran who had operated behind enemy lines during the air campaign. He'd been a survival instructor before retirement, the kind of man who could build a shelter from nothing and make fire in a rainstorm. Colonel William Reed retired. He was 70, Marine infantry officer, combat veteran of multiple deployments, tactical planning specialist. He had been the one making the big decisions while younger men executed them. Age had slowed his body, but not his mind, and Thomas Blackwood completed the circle, the youngest of them at 58, but carrying the same weight of experience, the same understanding of what war really meant. "You have warrior spirit," Thomas said to Maya in front of these men who knew what that meant. "But spirit without discipline is just violence. Spirit without wisdom is just destruction. These men taught me. Now they will teach you." For the next 4 years, from age 14 to 18, Maya Blackwood received an education that was not available in any school, 3 afternoons a week plus weekends. She trained with these 4 Gulf War veterans who decided that the next generation of warriors deserved everything they had learned the hard way. Gunny O'Sullivan taught her to shoot, not just point and pull the trigger, but the full discipline of marksmanship, breathing control, trigger squeeze, sight picture, follow through. They would drive out to private land owned by a friend of his. And she would spend hours with a .22 rifle learning the fundamentals. Later, when she was older, he would progress her to pistol, then carbine, then precision rifle. He taught her weapon maintenance, malfunction clearance, the mindset of controlled aggression. "Combat shooting is not about accuracy at leisure," O'Sullivan would say, his Boston accent still strong after decades in Washington. "It is about acceptable accuracy under extreme stress. You learn to make the shot that is good enough, fast enough, when your heart is trying to beat out of your chest and you have not slept in 2 days." Chief Kowalski taught her survival skills and field medicine, how to navigate without GPS, how to find water, how to build shelter, how to move through terrain without being detected. He taught her trauma care. The kind of practical medicine that kept people alive in the minutes before professional help arrived, tourniquet application, wound packing, airway management, the brutal calculus of triage. "In Desert Storm," Kowalski told her, "we operated in small teams, sometimes days from support. You had to be able to keep yourself and your team alive with what you carried. That has not changed. Technology gets better, but the fundamentals remain. Colonel Reed taught her how to think like a tactician. He would set up scenarios, force her to make decisions under pressure, critique her reasoning afterward, attack or defend, move or stay, engage or evade. He taught her to read terrain, to understand fields of fire, to think about second and third order effects. Tactics, Reed said, is just problem solving under the worst possible circumstances. You learn to make the least bad decision in a situation where all your options are terrible. That is leadership. And Thomas taught her the physical skills, the hand-to-hand combat that would one day save her life and define her career. Krav Maga formed the foundation, that brutally practical Israeli system designed for soldiers who needed to survive real violence. But he supplemented it with judo, with wrestling, with boxing, building a comprehensive understanding of how to control, damage, or escape from a larger, stronger opponent. Size matters, Thomas told her 100 times. Strength matters, but leverage matters more. Timing matters more. Understanding your opponent's intentions before they fully form matters most of all. You will never be the biggest person in the fight, so you become the smartest, the fastest, the most technically precise. The 4 men told her stories from their war, not the sanitized versions they told at public events, but the real stories, the complicated ones that did not fit neatly into narratives about glory or heroism. They told her about fear, about confusion, about the chaos of combat where nothing goes according to plan. They told her about the weight of responsibility, about losing people you cared about the guilt that follows you home. But they always told her about purpose, about believing in something larger than yourself, about the bonds formed with people who trust you with their lives, about the satisfaction of doing something difficult that truly matters. We did not have women in ground combat roles during our time, O'Sullivan said one afternoon when Maya was 16, was not allowed. But we saw what happened when we could not engage with half the population in the places we operated. That was a vulnerability. The enemy used it against us. You are going to be part of fixing that. You think the army is ready? Maya asked. The 4 men exchanged glances. Reed spoke carefully. The army is never ready for change. The army adapts to change after change forces itself upon them. You will not have an easy path. You will be scrutinized more than men, judged by different standards, held to higher expectations. People will question whether you belong, whether you are qualified, whether standards were lowered to accommodate you. He leaned forward, his old eyes sharp. So you become undeniable. You become so competent, so professional, so technically skilled, that the only question becomes why it took so long to let people like you serve. You honor the uniform. You honor your unit. You honor everyone who taught you. And eventually, the institution catches up. At 18, Maya Blackwood enlisted in the United States Army with an 11 Bravo infantry contract. Her father drove her to the military entrance processing station in Seattle. They sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before she went inside. You remember everything we taught you? Thomas asked. Every word. You understand it will not be easy. I am not looking for easy. Thomas nodded slowly. Your mother would be proud. She would have liked to see this day. Maya's mother had died when she was 10. Cancer that moved fast and left no time for goodbyes. Thomas had raised her alone, poured everything he knew into making sure she would be strong enough for whatever the world threw at her. Be so good they cannot ignore you, Thomas said, echoing the words he had told her 100 times. Earn everything twice, and when your moment comes, seize it. I will. I know you will. Now go show them what the old men taught you. Basic training at Fort Moore was unremarkable. Infantry 1 Station Unit training was easier than expected. Maya did not stand out, did not showboat, just consistently performed in the top 10% of every evaluation. She was strong enough, fast enough, skilled enough. The male soldiers in her company mostly ignored her or accepted her. A few made comments. She let it slide. It was not time yet. Now, 6 years later, Maya stood in that same installation, different circumstances, different stakes, same fundamental test. The morning after her arrival at the instructor course, she walked into the training facility at 5:30. The building was empty except for Morrison and his crew. They were running through grappling drills in the main room. Maya moved to the far corner, began her own warm-up routine. She stretched slowly, methodically, but her eyes were working, watching, cataloging. Morrison moved well, aggressive, powerful. He relied heavily on his size advantage, used his weight to control positions, applied techniques with force rather than precision. Webb was slower, more predictable. He telegraphed his movements with his shoulders before committing. Bennett was the most technically sound of the three, but he lacked confidence, hesitated at key moments, and then Maya saw it, Morrison's right shoulder. There was something wrong with it. A slight hesitation when he reached across his body, a minor adjustment in how he posted during scrambles, the way he unconsciously protected it during transitions, an old injury, probably from Ranger School, the kind of thing that never fully heals but that soldiers learn to work around. He was hiding it well. Most people would never notice, but Maya had been trained to notice, by men who knew that small details won fights. That observation was the foundation of victory, that the battle was often decided before the first punch was thrown. She filed the information away and continued her warm-up. On the second day, Derek Holloway approached her after the afternoon training session. He was 24 years old, infantry, 2-deployment veteran. He moved with the careful awareness of someone who had seen combat. He waited until they were alone near the equipment shed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "my uncle served Force Recon during Gulf War. He told me stories about experimental programs, women trained for specialized operations, said they had a marking, a dragon tattoo." Maya looked at him carefully, evaluating whether this was a threat or an opportunity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Morrison and his crew are planning something. I have heard them talking. They think you do not belong here, think you are proof of lowered standards. They are going to try to prove it publicly." "And you are warning me why?" Holloway met her eyes. "Because my uncle said those programs were necessary, said women could go places men could not, do things men could not do, said the military was better for having them, even if people did not want to admit it. If you are one of them, you deserve better than what Morrison is planning." Maya was quiet for a moment, then slowly rolled up her right sleeve, just enough to show the small dragon tattoo on her inner wrist. Holloway nodded slowly, something like respect in his expression. "I knew it. My uncle was right. This conversation does not leave here." "Understood, ma'am. But be careful. Morrison has friends in high places. They are setting you up." "Let them." "Ma'am? Let them set it up. Sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is to let people learn it the hard way. I appreciate the warning, specialist, but I can handle Morrison." What Maya did not say was that she had already identified Morrison as a threat on day one. She had watched him, studied his movement patterns, noted the old shoulder injury that made him favor his right side, cataloged his techniques and tendencies. She had done the same with Webb and Bennett. She had run through scenarios in her mind, planned responses, prepared for confrontation, because that is what her father had taught her. That is what 4 Gulf War veterans had drilled into her when she was a teenager in a garage in Seattle. Be ready. Be prepared. When the moment comes, execute without hesitation. On day 10, Command Sergeant Major Thorne watched Maya teach a class and saw something that confirmed his suspicions. The way she moved, the way she broke down techniques, the precision of her demonstrations. This was not someone who had learned combatives from Army instructors. This was someone who had been trained by people who had used these skills in actual combat, in contexts where mistakes meant death. After class, he made a phone call to an old friend, a retired Special Forces colonel he had served with in Iraq. "I have got a captain in my instructor course," Thorne said. "Service record shows 14 months of classified training. Classification markers I have never seen before. She moves like your guys, teaches like your guys. What am I dealing with here?" The colonel was quiet for a long moment. "Ray, I cannot talk about specific programs, but if you have got a soldier with that kind of background, my advice is simple. Trust her. Protect her if you can. And for God's sake, do not underestimate her." "That is what I thought. Thanks." Thorne hung up and made a decision. Whatever Morrison was planning, whatever was being encouraged from behind the scenes, he would allow it to proceed to a point. But he would maintain control. He would be the safety officer. He would ensure it did not go too far. And if Maya was who he thought she would handle herself just fine. On day 12, Morrison filed his formal complaint. Maya was teaching unauthorized techniques, creating safety risks. Her presence was a distraction and a liability. The complaint was detailed, professional-looking, and completely calculated to force a response. Thorne investigated, reviewed the techniques Maya taught, compared them to doctrinal standards. Everything she taught was within parameters. Some of it was more advanced than standard curriculum, but it was not unauthorized. She was making other instructors look less capable by comparison. And that was the real complaint. He told Morrison the complaint was unfounded. Morrison's face went red. 2 days later, the proposal came through official channels. A 3-on-1 demonstration match. Training evolution focused on defensive tactics under numerical disadvantage. Morrison, Webb, and Bennett against Maya. Controlled techniques. Immediate stop on taps. Thorne as primary safety officer. Thorne should have denied it immediately, should have recognized it for what it was, shut it down, protected Maya from institutional harassment. But pressure was coming from somewhere above his pay grade. And Thorne was 62 years old, 8 months from retirement, in no position to fight battles with senior leadership, so he approved it with conditions, strict safety protocols, his authority to halt the match at any time. Medical personnel standing by, and he made sure Maya understood what she was walking into. "Captain," he said, pulling her aside, "you do not have to do this. This is Morrison trying to embarrass you publicly. I can still shut it down." Maya looked at him with those calm eyes that had seen things he could not imagine. "Sergeant Major, with respect, you cannot shut this down. Not really. Even if you deny this specific match, the attitude remains. The belief that I do not belong, that standards were lowered, that my presence undermines the institution. This is not about one training evolution. It is about a lesson that needs to be taught. And you are confident you can teach that lesson. I was trained by people who fought in your war, Sergeant Major, by people who understood that competence has no gender requirement, by an institution that does not officially exist anymore, but whose standards were higher than anything in the conventional military. Morrison does not know what he is challenging, but he is about to learn." Thorne studied her face, saw absolute certainty. "All right, Captain. We will do this, but I am keeping it controlled, and if he crosses a line, I am pulling him out, regardless of politics." "Fair enough." That evening, Maya called her father. Thomas Blackwood answered on the second ring, his voice still strong despite being 72 years old. "Dad." "Maya, I can hear it in your voice. What is happening?" She explained the situation. 3-on-1 public demonstration, setup designed to humiliate her. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "You worried?" "No." "Then why call?" "Because I wanted you to know I was thinking about everything you taught me. You and Gunny and Chief and the Colonel. All of it matters. All of it prepared me for this. Nothing will go wrong. You are too good." "I know. But Maya, remember what this is really about. It is not about proving you are better than them. It is about teaching them that warriors come in all forms, that competence cannot be measured by size or gender, that the old ways, the fundamental skills we taught you, they still matter. Show them that. Make us proud. I will, Dad. I know you will. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow you teach a lesson that those boys will remember for the rest of their lives. Maya hung up and sat in her barracks room. Door open to catch the evening breeze. She cleaned her boots with the methodical care her father had taught her years ago. The 2 sets of dog tags sat on her wall locker, one from Major Diana Mercer, who had died in Bagram, one from Lieutenant Samantha Reeves, who had died in Mosul, 2 women who had believed in her, who had trained beside her, who had died believing this work mattered. She thought about the 11 other women scattered across the military, carrying the same mark, the same skills, the same burden of being too capable to be believed, but too classified to be acknowledged. Maya picked up the dog tags, held them in her palm, felt their weight against her skin. "I will not let you down," she whispered. "Either of you." She placed them carefully back on the locker. Then she turned off the light and lay down on her bunk. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, casting shadows that moved across the walls like memories. She did not close her eyes right away. Instead, she stared at the darkness and let her mind work through the scenarios one more time. Morrison would come in aggressive, try to use his size early. She would let him commit, use his momentum against him. Webb would follow Morrison's lead, predictable, exploitable. Bennett was the wild card, young, uncertain. He might hesitate at the wrong moment, or he might try to prove himself with reckless aggression. 3 men, 3 different problems, 3 different solutions. Maya had trained for this her entire life. Not just the physical skills, but the mental preparation, the ability to see a fight before it happened, to know the outcome before the first move was made. That was what separated warriors from soldiers. That was what her father and the old veterans had given her. Not just techniques, but understanding. Tomorrow, 3 men would try to prove she did not belong. Tomorrow, she would show them exactly where she had come from. Tomorrow, the dragon would begin to stir, and everyone watching would learn that size and strength were not the only measures of a warrior. Maya closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, steady and deep. The face of Major Mercer appeared in her mind, then Lieutenant Reeves, then her father, then Gunny O'Sullivan and Chief Kowalski and Colonel Reed, all the people who had shaped her, all the lessons they had taught, all the sacrifices they had made. She carried them all, and tomorrow she would honor every single one. The night grew quiet around her. The Georgia heat slowly faded, and somewhere in the darkness, Maya Blackwood found the peace that comes only to those who know exactly who they are and what they are capable of. She was ready, not just for the fight, but for everything that would come after. The story does not begin at Fort Moore. It begins in fire, in blood, in a place called Kandahar, where Maya Blackwood learned what it truly meant to be a warrior. March 2021, Afghanistan. The war that never seemed to end was finally winding down, a slow de-escalation that still killed people regularly, but no longer dominated headlines back home. Most combat operations had transitioned to Afghan forces. American units provided support, training, quick reaction capability. Maya was 25 years old that year. She'd been in the Army for 7 years. Infantry. 2 deployments already under her belt. She had proven herself competent, professional, reliable, but she had not yet been tested. Not really, not in the way that separates those who think they are warriors from those who actually are. She was assigned to 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, deployed to Kandahar Province, attached to a female engagement team. The FET mission was straightforward on paper, complex in execution. They moved with infantry units into villages and compounds. But while the men talked to fighting-age males, the FET engaged with women and children. Intelligence collection, medical assessment, relationship building, accessing the half of the population that male soldiers could not effectively reach. It was exactly what her father and the old veterans had predicted all those years ago in Seattle, the blind spot they had identified in Desert Storm. The vulnerability they had seen exploited. Now Maya was part of fixing it. The team leader was Major Diana Mercer, 38 years old, 15 years in service, tough as tungsten and twice as sharp. She had come up through the enlisted ranks, earned her commission through the Green to Gold program, done 3 previous deployments. She had no patience for incompetence and infinite patience for people willing to learn. Mercer spotted something in Maya within the first week. The way she moved, the way she processed information, the calm she maintained under stress. After a particularly long mission, she pulled Maya aside. "You have had training beyond what the Army gave you," Mercer said. It was not a question. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "My father, Force Recon, Gulf War. He and some of his veteran friends taught me." Mercer smiled slightly. "That explains it. You move like someone who has been taught by people who actually use this stuff in combat, not just instructors running a curriculum. Keep that to yourself, but keep using it. It is keeping you alive." Over the following months, Mercer became more than a commanding officer. She became a mentor. She taught Maya the subtleties of cultural engagement, how to read body language across cultural barriers, how to ask questions that did not sound like interrogation, how to build trust with women who had every reason to distrust outsiders. She taught her the politics of being a woman in a combat zone, how to navigate the institutional resistance, how to prove yourself without alienating the men you served alongside, how to be strong without being threatening, and she taught her the weight of responsibility. "Every decision you make out here affects someone," Mercer said one evening as they cleaned their weapons in the dying light. "The intel you gather might save American lives, or it might get an Afghan family killed by the Taliban for talking to us. You carry that weight. You do not get to put it down. You just learn to walk with it." Maya absorbed everything. Every lesson, every principle, every hard truth. She did not know that in 3 months she would watch Mercer die, and that her death would change everything. The ambush hit at 03:40 hours on a moonless night in March 2021. The team was moving between compounds in a small village near the Pakistani border, using night vision and thermal optics, 4 vehicles in a loose convoy. The interpreter was in the lead vehicle with Major Mercer. Maya was in the second vehicle with the team medic and 3 infantry soldiers. The mission was supposed to be routine, village assessment, talk to women, gather information, build rapport, leave. They had done it dozens of times. The first indication was the RPG contrail appearing in Maya's night vision like a bright green streak. It hit the lead vehicle from the right side, detonating against the door but not penetrating the armor. The explosion was loud enough to feel in your chest, bright enough to white out the night vision for a second. Then the small arms fire opened up from 2 positions. PKM machine guns. The distinctive sound of 7.60 rounds snapping through the air. That particular crack of bullets breaking the sound barrier inches from your head. The interpreter in the lead vehicle took a round through the open window, through the throat, killed instantly. Major Mercer was in the process of dismounting when the second RPG hit. This one detonated close enough to send fragmentation through her left leg, tearing open her femoral artery. The convoy came to a disorganized halt. The infantry soldiers began returning fire. The team medic tried to move forward to reach Mercer, but was pinned behind a compound wall by machine gun fire from 2 directions, rounds chewing up the mud brick, kicking up dust that made it impossible to see. Maya was 4th in line, 40 meters from the lead vehicle. She could see Mercer on the ground, see the arterial spray even in the green wash of night vision, understood instantly that without intervention in the next 2 minutes, Major Diana Mercer would bleed out and die. The training from her father, from Gunnery Sergeant O'Sullivan, from Chief Kowalski, from 100 hours of stress inoculation, all of it activated without conscious thought. She moved, low crawl, using the irrigation ditch that ran parallel to the dirt road, M4 carbine across her forearms, body as flat as possible. Incoming fire snapped overhead, close enough to hear the supersonic crack, close enough to feel the pressure wave against her helmet. The ditch was 6 inches deep, barely enough concealment, but it was what she had, 40 meters of open ground under fire, moving during the pauses when the machine gun shifted to engage other targets, freezing when it swung back. It took 90 seconds that felt like hours. She reached Major Mercer, saw the wound, the blood soaking into the dirt. The Major's eyes wide and conscious, already going into shock. Maya rolled to her side, pulled a cat tourniquet from her kit, worked it around Mercer's left thigh above the wound site, tightened it one-handed while staying prone. "Stay with me, ma'am," Maya said, her voice steady despite everything. "You taught me never quit. Do not you quit on me now." The machine gun fire found them, rounds impacted close, kicking up dirt, spraying debris against Maya's face and arms. She rolled partially over Mercer's body, shielding her with her own mass, brought her M4 up with her right hand, and began returning fire. She could not see the enemy position clearly, was firing based on muzzle flash and sound, but the principle was suppression. Make them keep their heads down. Buy time. She burned through a 30-round magazine in controlled bursts. Reloaded, burned through another. Her left hand stayed pressed on Mercer's wound, maintaining pressure even though the tourniquet was doing most of the work. She could feel Mercer's heartbeat, rapid and thready, feel her trying to say something. "Save it, ma'am. Stay quiet. Breathe steady. Medevac is coming." Second magazine gone. Third magazine, her last, feeding into the rifle. Maya had never been more aware of every sense, the smell of copper from blood, the smell of burning propellant from her weapon, the sound of rounds cracking past, the deeper boom of friendlies engaging with heavier weapons, the texture of dirt under her body, the weight of Mercer's gear, the specific tension in the cat tourniquet's windlass. Time became strange. Everything happened very fast and very slow simultaneously. Air support arrived 9 minutes after the initial contact. Apache helicopters, their chain guns turning the ambush positions into dust and fire. The firing stopped. The team medic reached them 90 seconds later, took over treatment, started IV fluids. Medevac helicopter landed 6 minutes after that. They loaded Mercer, still conscious, eyes locked on Maya's face. The interpreter did not survive. His body was recovered, handled with respect, prepared for return home. Major Mercer survived the helicopter ride to Bagram by 90 seconds. The field surgeon later wrote in his report that without the tourniquet application and sustained pressure under fire, she would have bled out in under 3 minutes. Maya's actions had bought enough time for professional medical intervention to work. 3 days later, Maya stood in the hospital at Bagram Air Base, looking at Major Mercer in the ICU, tubes and monitors and the steady beep of machines tracking her vitals. The Major was barely conscious, but her eyes found Maya's face. Her hand moved weakly, grabbed Maya's wrist. "They are coming for you," Mercer whispered, voice rough from intubation. "Ma'am? Special program, women operators. Say yes. That is an order, Blackwood." "Ma'am, you need to rest." "Promise me." "Say yes." "I promise." Mercer's grip relaxed. She closed her eyes. She died that night. Pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that broke loose and traveled to her lungs. The wound had been survivable. The complications killed her anyway. War does not care about fairness. Maya stood at the memorial service wearing her dress uniform, holding herself together through discipline and training. Mercer's personal effects were shipped home to family in Virginia. Among them were 2 sets of dog tags, the ones she wore, and a spare set she kept with her gear. After the service, someone from Mercer's family quietly gave Maya the spare set. "She would have wanted you to have these," they said. She wrote about you in her last letter, said you were special." Maya held the dog tags in her hand. The metal was still warm from being in the box. She hung them around her neck, next to her own, and knew that she would carry this weight for the rest of her life. The woman approached Maya 3 days after the memorial service, tall, lean, early 50s, wearing civilian clothes but moving like military. She had the look of someone who had spent a lot of time in places that did not appear on regular maps. "Sergeant Blackwood," the woman said. "Colonel Catherine Vance, Special Activities Division. Can we talk somewhere private?" They walked to an empty maintenance bay, far from listening ears. "Major Mercer sent me a message 6 hours before she died," Vance said without preamble. "She said I needed to talk to you, said you were exactly what we were looking for." "For what, ma'am?" "A program, classified, training female soldiers for missions requiring cultural access in denied areas, not officially special operations, but using their methods, their standards, their instructors." Maya said nothing, waiting. 12 slots, 48 applicants, selection standards equivalent to Special Forces assessment, training conducted by Tier 1 instructors, Israeli Krav Maga specialists, Delta Force close quarters battle experts, Ranger qualified medical personnel. 8 months at Fort Bragg, at a compound that does not exist on any official map. Vance paused, reading Maya's expression. "You will become invisible until necessary, undeniable when revealed. You will do missions that cannot be acknowledged. If you are caught, we do not know you. If you die, your family gets a letter about a training accident." Maya pulled out the spare dog tags she had been carrying, the ones from Major Mercer. She held them up. "What would I be doing exactly?" "Things that matter, things that save lives, things male soldiers cannot do because of who they are. You saw it yourself. Half the population we could not access. That is changing. You would be part of that change." Maya looked at the dog tags, thought about her father, about the 4 veterans who trained her, about Mercer's last words. "When do I start?" Vance smiled slightly, reached up and pulled back her right sleeve just enough to show a small tattoo on her inner wrist. A dragon. Stylized. No bigger than a quarter. "Welcome to the Sisterhood, Sergeant Blackwood. Welcome to Operation Sphinx." And that is where the real story began. The compound at Fort Bragg did not appear on any official map. No signs marked the turnoff from the main road, just a gap in the tree line and a dirt track that wound through North Carolina pine forest for 2 miles before reaching a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The guards at the gate wore no unit patches, no name tapes, just blank fatigues and weapons held with the casual competence of people who knew how to use them. Maya arrived on a gray morning in April 2021, 1 month after Major Mercer's death. Sitting in the back of an unmarked van with 5 other women. Nobody spoke during the drive. They had all received the same instructions. Pack light. Tell no one. Prepare for 8 months of training that officially did not exist. The compound itself was spare and functional. Barracks built from concrete blocks, a medical facility, a kill house for close quarters combat training, an obstacle course that looked like it had been designed by someone with a sadistic imagination, and a classroom building where the windows were covered with blackout material. 48 women stood in formation that first morning, ages ranging from 22 to 34, drawn from combat emos across the Army, infantry, military police, intelligence specialists, medics. They had all volunteered. They had all passed preliminary screening. Most of them would not finish. Colonel Catherine Vance stood before them in running gear, her dragon tattoo visible on her right wrist. She was 54 years old, had spent 26 years in service doing things she would never be able to talk about publicly, and she looked at the formation with the expression of someone evaluating raw material for a difficult project. "Operation Sphinx," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. exists to create a capability the United States military currently lacks: female operators who can access denied environments, conduct intelligence collection, perform direct action missions in contexts where male soldiers cannot effectively operate. She paused. Let that sink in. The selection standards are equivalent to Special Forces assessment and selection. The training pipeline utilizes Tier 1 instructors and methodologies. Approximately 25% of you will graduate. The rest will return to your units with no record of being here. No explanation beyond temporary duty reassignment. Another pause. This program is classified. If you discuss it outside authorized channels, you will face criminal prosecution. If you fail, you will forget this place exists. If you quit, same result. Her eyes swept the formation. Questions? Nobody raised a hand. Vance smiled slightly. Good. Week 1 begins now. Run. The first 2 weeks were designed to break people. Not physically, though the physical component was brutal. 12-mile ruck marches with 65-pound packs in under 3 hours. Obstacle courses run until muscle failure. Combat fitness assessments that pushed everyone past what they thought were their limits. But the real pressure was psychological. Sleep deprivation, constant evaluation, the grinding awareness that every mistake was being recorded, every weakness identified. 15 women quit in week 1. They simply decided the cost was not worth the reward. Walked into the administrative building, signed the paperwork that would send them back to their previous assignments. No judgment, no shame. Just a recognition that this particular path was not for them. 9 more were cut in week 2, not because they quit, but because the cadre determined they did not have the right combination of attributes, too slow to adapt, too rigid in their thinking, unable to handle ambiguity, good soldiers, just not right for this specific mission set. Maya survived those first weeks by remembering everything her father and his friends had taught her. When the ruck march felt impossible, she heard Gunny O'Sullivan's voice. Pain is just information. Note it and move on. When the sleep deprivation made her want to quit, she remembered Chief Kowalski. Fatigue makes cowards of us all. The warrior acknowledges the fatigue and performs anyway. When the evaluators pushed her to make decisions under pressure, she heard Colonel Reed. Perfect information does not exist. Make the least bad decision with what you have. By week 4, 24 women remained. The cadre shifted from breaking people to building them. The Israeli instructor arrived in week 5. He was short, compact, maybe 40 years old with scars on his hands and a manner that suggested he had seen more combat than he would ever discuss. He had served with Sayeret Matkal, Israel's premier special operations unit, and he taught Krav Maga not as a martial art, but as a survival system. Fighting is not sport, he said on the first day. His accent thick, but his English clear. Fighting is chaos. Fighting is when someone is trying to kill you and you must kill them first or die. Everything I teach you is about that moment. Forget fair. Forget rules. Survive by any means necessary. The training was brutal and practical. Eye strikes, throat strikes, groin attacks, joint destructions, how to fight from inferior positions, how to access weapons when you are being controlled, how to create space when someone larger is trying to crush you, how to transition from empty hand to knife to gun in a single fluid movement. Maya absorbed it like a sponge. Her father had taught her the fundamentals, but this was the advanced course, taught by someone who had used these techniques in actual combat. She practiced until the movements became automatic, until she could execute them exhausted, injured, under stress, in the dark. The instructor noticed. After a particularly intense session, he pulled her aside. "You have trained before," he said. "Not army training. Something else. My father, Gulf War veteran, he and his friends taught me." The instructor nodded slowly. "They taught you well. You have foundation. Now we build the house." He tapped his temple. "But remember, the best fight is the one you do not have. Be invisible. When you must be seen, be undeniable. Week 8 brought SEER training: survival, evasion, resistance, escape, the practical skills of staying alive in hostile territory and resisting interrogation if captured. They were driven into the woods with minimal equipment, given a grid coordinate 40 miles away, and told to reach it within 72 hours while a hunter force tried to capture them. Maya partnered with a woman named Lieutenant Samantha Reeves. Sam was 29 years old, intelligence specialist with 2 previous deployments. She was tall, athletic, had a quick smile and a quicker mind. They had been circling each other since week 1, recognizing something similar in each other: the drive, the determination, the refusal to quit. They moved through the North Carolina wilderness using techniques Chief Kowalski had drilled into Maya years earlier, avoided trails, moved at night, used terrain for concealment. They reached the extraction point in 68 hours. Then came the resistance phase: captured, hooded, placed in stress positions, subjected to sleep deprivation and simulated interrogation. The point was not to teach them to resist forever. Nobody could. The point was to teach them how to buy time, how to manage information, how to protect critical intelligence even under extreme duress. Maya broke on hour 68, gave up false information, fed them a cover story that sounded plausible. The interrogator smiled and released her. In the debrief, the instructor explained she had held longer than most Delta Force operators in the same scenario. "But remember this feeling," he said, "the helplessness, the fear, the knowledge that you told them things you did not want to tell them. Remember it, and do everything in your power to never be captured for real." 8 more women quit during SEER Week. The psychological pressure was too much. They had volunteered for challenge, not torture. No one blamed them. Week 12 brought trauma medicine, taught by Ranger-qualified physician assistants who had done multiple combat deployments. The training went far beyond standard combat lifesaver certification: surgical cricothyrotomy, creating an emergency airway when someone's throat was crushed; needle decompression for tension; pneumothorax, when air trapped in the chest cavity was crushing the lungs; hemorrhage control for wounds that regular tourniquets could not address. They practiced on pig cadavers, on high-fidelity mannequins that bled realistic blood, and eventually on each other under controlled circumstances, actually performing procedures up to the point where real damage would occur. The training was designed to remove hesitation. In combat, hesitation killed people. They needed to be able to cut into human flesh without freezing, to make life or death medical decisions in seconds. Maya's hands never shook. The instructors noticed her background. That night in Afghanistan with Major Mercer, it had prepared her for this in ways most of the other students had not experienced. 4 more women were cut during medical training, not because they could not learn the procedures, but because they could not perform them under stress. In the simulations where explosions were detonating and instructors were yelling and multiple casualties needed treatment simultaneously, they froze. Good people, but not ready for this level of intensity. By week 16, 12 women remained. The cadre announced they had survived selection. Now came the actual training. Delta Force instructors taught close quarters battle, room clearing with live ammunition, multiple shooters moving through structures, making split-second decisions about threats. They learned to transition seamlessly from rifle to pistol, to shoot while moving, to engage targets in confined spaces where one mistake could kill a teammate. The training was conducted in the Kill House, a modular facility that could be reconfigured into different layouts. At first, they used simulation ammunition. Then they progressed to live fire with role players acting as hostages and threats. The stress was immense. The learning curve was steep, but gradually, over hundreds of repetitions, the skills became ingrained. Maya's background with Gunny O'Sullivan gave her an advantage. She already understood marksmanship fundamentals, already knew how to manage a weapon under stress. Now she was learning to apply those skills in 3-dimensional environments with teammates depending on her judgment, Cultural operations training came from instructors who had spent years working in denied areas. They taught the nuances of engaging with populations that did not trust Americans, did not trust outsiders, did not trust women in non-traditional roles, how to build rapport, how to ask questions that did not sound like interrogation, how to observe and gather intelligence while appearing to do something completely different. Your gender is your advantage, one instructor said. In most traditional cultures, women talk to women about things they would never discuss with men. You can access information that male operators cannot, but you must be culturally competent. You must understand the local context. You must build genuine relationships, not just extract intelligence. Week 24 brought the integrated training exercise, a 72-hour field problem that combined everything they had learned: navigate to multiple objectives, conduct reconnaissance, perform a direct action mission in the kill house, provide trauma care to simulated casualties, evade a hunter force, extract to a designated point. Maya's partner was Samantha Reeves. They had trained together since week 8, developed an understanding that came from shared hardship. The exercise began at midnight on a cold October night. They were given minimal equipment, a series of grid coordinates, and instructions that were deliberately vague. For 68 hours, everything went according to plan. They navigated successfully. They gathered the required intelligence. They executed the direct action mission in the kill house flawlessly. Cleared 4 rooms, neutralized 6 threats, extracted a hostage role player without injury. Then, at hour 68, Sam landed wrong coming off a rope obstacle and broke her ankle. The sound was audible, a crack that made Maya's stomach drop. Sam went down, could not put weight on the leg, face pale with pain. They were 8 miles from the extraction point. The hunter force was between them and the objective. The rules allowed for calling a safety abort, but that meant automatic failure of the exercise. Maya looked at Sam. Sam looked back. "Leave me," Sam said. "Complete the mission." "Not happening." "That is an order, Sergeant." "With respect, ma'am, I am not leaving you. We finish together or we do not finish." Maya fashioned a splint from branches and paracord, gave Sam an improvised crutch, and then simply picked her up in a fireman's carry, 135 pounds of soldier plus gear plus weapons. She settled the weight across her shoulders and started moving. 8 miles through North Carolina forest in the dark, carrying a casualty, evading a hunter force that had thermal optics and superior numbers. Maya drew on everything Chief Kowalski had taught her about land navigation and movement. She used terrain for concealment, moved during the hunter force's shift changes when they were less alert, paused when Sam needed to catch her breath. Her legs burned, her back screamed. Her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. But she did not stop. She did not slow down. She did not quit. They reached the extraction point at hour 90, 20 minutes before the deadline. Maya set Sam down gently, and they both collapsed. The evaluators found them there, exhausted beyond description, but mission complete. The lead instructor was a grizzled Special Forces Sergeant Major with 28 years in service. He looked at them and shook his head slowly. "First time anyone has completed this exercise carrying a casualty the full distance," he said. "Most people call the safety abort. Some people leave their partner and complete solo. Nobody carries someone 8 miles and makes the timeline." He extended his hand to Maya. She shook it, too tired to speak. "You have got something special, Blackwood. Do not ever lose it." Week 32. Graduation day. 12 women stood in formation, 12 out of the original 48 who had started. They had survived selection, completed training, proven they belonged. They represented something the American military had never had before. A cadre of female operators trained to the same standard as Special Operations Forces. The ceremony was private. No cameras, no press, no official record, just the 12 graduates, the cadre who trained them. and a handful of senior officers who had supported the program from the shadows. Colonel Vance gave a short speech. "You are weapons the enemy will never see coming, invisible until necessary, undeniable when revealed. You do not exist on paper, but you exist where it matters. In the dark places where this country needs you most, you will do missions that cannot be acknowledged. You will face dangers that will not be recognized. You will save lives that will never know you saved them. That is the burden you have chosen to carry. I am honored to serve with you." Then came the tattoo ceremony. One by one, each woman received the small dragon mark on her inner right wrist, the symbol of Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protector of women, small enough to be discreet, permanent enough to last forever, a mark of completion, of capability, of belonging to something that officially did not exist. Maya sat in the chair and watched the tattoo artist work. The needle stung, but she barely noticed. When it was done, she looked at the small dragon on her wrist and felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just Maya Blackwood, infantry soldier. She was something more, something harder to define, but impossible to deny. The missions began immediately. They were split into teams and deployed to different theaters. Maya found herself back in Afghanistan for 6 months, then Syria for 4 months, then Yemen for 3 months. The work was exactly what they had trained for, accessing populations male soldiers could not reach, gathering intelligence through relationships male operators could not build, providing medical care that opened doors conventional forces could not open. She worked village operations in Afghanistan, building networks of women who provided information about Taliban movements. She conducted medical support missions in Syria, treating children in areas where any American military presence was officially denied. She tracked high-value targets in Yemen by developing relationships with their family members, particularly the women who knew everything but told male interrogators nothing. The work was dangerous, exhausting, and absolutely essential. Maya saw the impact directly. Intelligence she gathered led to the capture of 3 Taliban commanders. Medical care she provided saved dozens of civilian lives, built goodwill that made populations more willing to cooperate with coalition forces. Relationships she developed provided early warning about attacks that saved American lives. She was good at it, better than good. But before the program could prove itself fully, there was Mosul. The mission was supposed to be routine, supporting a Delta Force hostage rescue operation. American aid workers held by remnants of a terrorist cell. Intelligence indicated they were being moved. Window of opportunity closing fast. Maya's element was providing outer security and preparing to conduct immediate medical treatment on freed hostages. Sam Reeves was with her. Her ankle had healed. She had returned to full duty. They had requested to be paired together for this mission. One more operation as a team. The breach went perfectly. Delta assaulters hit the compound at 300 hours, cleared it in 90 seconds, secured the hostages. Maya's element moved forward to begin casualty care. That is when the secondary IED detonated. It was command wire initiated, someone watching from a distance, waiting for the perfect moment. The explosion hit one of the up-armored vehicles in Maya's element, the blast powerful enough to flip it, the secondary fragmentation turning the interior into a kill zone. Maya was 20 meters away when it happened. She ran toward the burning vehicle without thinking, pulled open the damaged door, started dragging people out. The first 2 were injured but alive. The third was Lieutenant Samantha Reeves, her partner from training, her friend from 100 missions. Sam was still alive when Maya got her out of the vehicle, but the injuries were catastrophic. Fragmentation through the torso, internal bleeding that no field medicine could address. Maya knew it immediately, had seen enough combat casualties to recognize unsurvivable wounds. She held Sam anyway, applied pressure to wounds that were bleeding too fast, called for medevac that would arrive too late. Sam looked up at her, blood on her lips, recognition in her eyes. "Tell my daughter," Sam said, voice barely a whisper. "You are going to tell her yourself. Stay with me. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I died doing something that mattered." Sam's eyes lost focus. Her breathing stopped. Maya felt the moment her heart stopped beating, that terrible stillness that separates the living from the dead. She sat there holding Sam's body until the medics physically pulled her away. At the memorial service, Maya stood in her dress uniform and received Sam's spare dog tags from the unit commander. 2 sets now, Major Mercer's from Afghanistan, Lieutenant Reeves's from Mosul. She kept them both, carried them everywhere. Reminders of the cost of this work. In October 2022, the order came down. Operation Sphinx was officially dissolved. All 12 graduates would be reassigned to conventional units. Service records would be sanitized. The 14 months of Sphinx training marked simply as Training Specialized Program. All mission files would be destroyed. The compound at Fort Bragg would be repurposed. For official purposes, Operation Sphinx had never existed. The 12 women were scattered across the military, given conventional assignments, told to resume normal careers. The training remained, the skills remained, the knowledge remained, but the institutional support vanished overnight. Maya took it hard, not the dissolution itself, but what it represented, the acknowledgement that politics mattered more than capability. That perception mattered more than performance. They had proven the concept worked. They had conducted successful missions. They had done exactly what the program was designed to do. And none of it mattered because someone in Washington had decided it was politically inconvenient. When the orders came through reassigning her to conventional duty, Maya called her father. Thomas Blackwood was 70 years old by then, still living in Seattle, still sharp despite the years. "They are shutting down the program," Maya said, pretending it never existed. "But you existed. You did the work. They cannot take that from you." "Feels like they are trying to." "Then you find another way to use what you learned. The institution fails all the time. Individual warriors still have purpose. Find yours." Maya thought about that for a long time. Find purpose. Use what she had learned. Teach the next generation. Eventually, the path became clear. She volunteered for the Modern Army Combatives Level 4 instructor course at Fort Moore, not running from her past, weaponizing it. If the Army would not let her operate anymore, she would teach others to operate. If Sphinx could not exist officially, its knowledge would survive through the people she trained. The paperwork went through. Orders to Fort Moore, Georgia, 8-month course. If she graduated, she would be qualified to teach the Army's highest level of hand-to-hand combat to instructors across the force. She arrived in September 2024, 28 years old, carrying 2 sets of dog tags and a dragon tattoo that told a story no one would believe. The night before the match with Morrison, Maya sat alone in her barracks room. The window was open. A warm Georgia breeze drifted through, carrying the smell of pine and red clay. She held the 2 sets of dog tags in her palm, Mercer's and Reeves's. The metal was cool against her skin. She thought about the women who had worn them. Major Mercer, who had seen something in her worth saving, who had used her dying breath to point Maya toward a future she could not have imagined. Sam Reeves, who had become her partner, her friend, her sister in everything but blood, who had trusted Maya to carry her 8 miles through hostile territory, who had died believing the work mattered. "I will not let you down," Maya whispered. "Either of you. Tomorrow I teach them what you taught me, that warriors are measured by what they do, not what they look like, not what others expect them to be." She placed the dog tags carefully on her wall locker. Then she walked to the small mirror above her sink, looked at her reflection, the scar through her eyebrow, the lean face, the eyes that had seen too much death for someone her age. She rolled up her sleeve, looked at the dragon tattoo, remembered the day she received it, the pride, the belonging, the sense that she had finally become what her father and the old veterans had been preparing her to be. The program was gone, but she remained. The sisterhood was scattered, but they endured, and tomorrow she would remind everyone at Fort Moore what it meant to underestimate a warrior. Maya turned off the light. She did not go to her bunk immediately. Instead, she stood by the window for a long moment, looking out at the Georgia night. The stars were bright, clearer than they had been in Afghanistan or Syria or Yemen. Somewhere out there, 11 other women carried the same mark, the same memories, the same burden. Somewhere out there, her father was probably sitting in his garage in Seattle, surrounded by the memories of his own war, thinking about the daughter he had raised to be a warrior. Somewhere out there, the spirits of Diana Mercer and Samantha Reeves were watching, waiting to see if their faith had been justified. Maya touched the dragon tattoo one more time. Then she went to her bunk and lay down. She did not close her eyes immediately. She let her mind settle. Let the training take over. Let her body find the calm that came before action. Tomorrow would bring the fight. But tonight was for remembering, for honoring, for preparing. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. The breeze whispered through the window. And Maya Blackwood, 28 years old, veteran of wars both acknowledged and classified, allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything that had brought her to this moment. The garage in Seattle, the 4 old veterans, the firefight in Kandahar, the training at Fort Bragg, the 8 miles through North Carolina darkness, the explosion in Mosul. All of it had led here, to this room, to this night, to the fight that waited in the morning. She was ready, not because she was unafraid, but because she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was action in spite of it. Major Mercer had taught her that. Sam Reeves had proven it, and tomorrow Maya Blackwood would honor them both. Her eyes finally closed, her breathing slowed, and in the darkness of her room, surrounded by the ghosts of everyone who had shaped her, Maya found peace. The dragon would wake with the sun, and Morrison would learn what it meant to challenge a warrior who had nothing left to prove to anyone but the dead. Word had spread through the company like wildfire through dry brush. Soldiers who had no official reason to be there found excuses to walk past the training area, to lean against the fence, to position themselves where they could watch. By the time the participants arrived, more than 60 people had gathered, sitting in the weathered bleachers or standing in clusters near the railroad tie perimeter. The September sun hung directly overhead, 95 degrees in the shade. Heat shimmered off every metal surface. The air was thick enough to chew. Command Sergeant Major Raymond Thorne stood at the ring's edge, whistle around his neck, expression carefully neutral. He had been doing this job for 40 years, had seen every kind of soldier, every kind of situation. This one made him deeply uncomfortable, but he had made his decision. He would allow it to proceed under strict control. He would be ready to intervene the instant it went wrong. What Thorne did not know was that 200 meters away, in an office overlooking the training complex, someone else was watching. Brigadier General Robert Sterling sat behind his desk with a pair of binoculars trained on the training pit. He was 65 years old, a Special Forces legend with combat deployments spanning 3 decades. He had been observing the situation for 3 weeks. Ever since an old friend at the Pentagon had called to tell him one of the Sphinx graduates was at Fort Moore and facing institutional resistance, Sterling had fought to keep Operation Sphinx alive during the political battle that ultimately killed it. He had lost that fight, but he had made damn sure the 12 graduates were protected when they scattered back to conventional assignments. Now one of them was being set up for public humiliation, and he intended to see how she handled it before deciding whether to intervene. Staff Sergeant Garrett Morrison entered the ring first, flanked by Sergeant Marcus Webb and Specialist Kyle Bennett. They had coordinated their appearance, all 3 wearing identical PT shirts, identical expressions of grim determination. Morrison rolled his neck, shook out his arms, looked at the gathering crowd like a gladiator entering the arena. His confidence was absolute. He was 6'2", 220 pounds, Ranger qualified, years of combatives training. He was facing a woman 8 inches shorter and 90 pounds lighter. In his mind, the outcome was predetermined. This was just about making the lesson public. Webb bounced on his toes, feeding off Morrison's energy, a mirror to his friend's aggression. Bennett tried to look confident, but his eyes kept darting to the spectators, to Thorne, to the medical personnel standing ready. He was 22 years old and beginning to understand he had been swept up in something larger than he realized. Then Maya Blackwood walked in, alone. No ceremony, no posturing, no dramatic entrance. She simply stepped over the railroad tie boundary and moved to the center of the ring, settling into a neutral stance, feet shoulder-width apart, hands loose at her sides, weight centered and balanced. Her face showed nothing, not anger, not fear, not anticipation, just stillness, the kind of stillness that comes from absolute certainty. She wore standard PT gear, nothing special, nothing that would give advantage or disadvantage. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. The dragon tattoo on her inner right wrist caught the sunlight for just a moment, a flash of ink that most spectators would not notice. She pressed her thumb against it once, briefly. Then her hands returned to her sides, and she waited. Thorne stepped to the center of the ring, positioned himself where he could see all 4 participants. Went over the rules one final time. His voice carried clearly across the training area, no microphone needed. This is a controlled training evolution. All techniques must maintain partner safety. Tap or verbal submission or my whistle means immediate stop. Any soldier who fails to comply will be removed from this course and face disciplinary action under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He paused. Medical personnel are standing by. I have authority to halt this match at any time for any reason. His eyes lingered on Morrison when he said it. Are these rules understood? Morrison nodded, jaw set, barely containing his eagerness. Thorne looked at Maya. She gave a single nod, economical and precise. The whistle blew. Morrison came in fast, trying to use his size to overwhelm Maya in the opening seconds. He shot for a double-leg takedown, the fundamental wrestling technique, head down and driving forward with all his weight, arms reaching to grab both her legs and drive her to the ground. Maya pivoted 45 degrees to her right, minimal movement, just enough. His momentum carried him past her, into empty air where she had been standing a fraction of a second earlier. Before he could recover his balance, before he could reset, Maya was already moving. She controlled his back, threading one arm under his near armpit while her other hand gripped his belt, using his own forward pressure against him. She took him down to the mat with technique that looked effortless, looked simple, looked like something anyone could do. The spectators who understood combatives recognized immediately what they were seeing. That was not luck. That was timing, refined through thousands of repetitions, reading an opponent's intention before they fully committed, using their own aggression as the weapon against them. Maya released Morrison immediately, not from kindness, from tactics. She rolled away and rose to her feet as Webb rushed in from her left side. He threw a wide hook punch, telegraphing the movement with his shoulders, committing his weight too early. Maya slipped inside his reach, making herself smaller, and executed an Osotogari sweep, major outer reap, her right leg hooking behind his left while her hands controlled his upper body. Webb hit the ground hard enough that the impact drove air from his lungs in a grunt that carried across the training area. Bennett came from her right, trying to time his attack while she was focused on Webb. He attempted a body lock, arms reaching to wrap around her torso and use his size advantage. Maya felt his approach through peripheral vision, that awareness they had trained into her during Sphinx, understanding space and movement without needing to look directly. She dropped her level, suddenly changing her height, slipping under his arms. Then she drove her shoulder into his abdomen, just below the rib cage, a targeted strike that disrupted his breathing and his balance. Bennett stumbled backward, coughing, trying to recover. Morrison was up again, angrier now, breathing harder. The easy victory he had expected had not materialized. He came in with more caution this time, trying to use his wrestling base properly. He set up a collar tie, hand behind Maya's neck, the other controlling her arm, and started to drive forward with his weight advantage. For 3 seconds, it looked like it might work. He was moving her backward, using his mass, his strength, everything he had been taught about controlling opponents. Then Maya turned her head sharply, a small movement that disrupted his grip structure, broke his hand position. She used his forward pressure against him and executed a lateral drop. She took him to the ground while maintaining top position, landing with her weight distributed perfectly, her knees settling across his chest. Her hands controlled his right arm in a Kimura grip, that figure 4 lock on the shoulder joint that could easily dislocate if pressure was applied. She did not crank it. She just held the position, demonstrating control, showing everyone watching that she could finish the submission but was choosing not to. The message was clear as spoken words. I could end this. I am choosing not to. Morrison should have tapped. Pride and anger stopped him. Instead, he tried to explode out of the position, using raw strength to bridge, lifting his hips violently to throw her off. It was exactly the wrong response against someone with Maya's level of technical skill. She rode the movement like water over stone, smooth and fluid, transitioned seamlessly to his back. Her legs sank hooks, one inside his left thigh, one inside his right, controlling his hips. Her arms slid under his chin into rear naked choke position, forearm across his throat, her other hand grabbing her own bicep to lock the structure. She held it there, without squeezing, without applying pressure, just positioning. The threat was implicit. One squeeze and blood flow to his brain would stop. He would have seconds before unconsciousness. She had complete control, and everyone watching knew it. Thorne stepped forward, ready to call the match. But Maya released before Morrison could tap. Before the intervention became necessary, she rolled away, came to her feet, and reset to neutral position. Morrison remained on his hands and knees for a moment, breathing hard, the first real doubt appearing in his eyes. The pattern repeated for 2.5 minutes that felt much longer to everyone watching. 3 men attacking with increasing desperation, using their size, their strength, their numerical advantage, everything they had, and Maya moving through them like wind through trees, always a half-second ahead of where they thought she would be, reading their intentions, exploiting their mistakes, demonstrating a level of technical mastery that made their advantages irrelevant. She was not flashy. There were no spinning kicks, no dramatic throws, nothing designed for show. Every movement had purpose. Every technique was fundamental. Every transition was efficient. It was the difference between someone who had learned combatives from a curriculum and someone who had been trained by people who had used these skills to stay alive in places where mistakes meant death. At the 3-minute mark, injuries were accumulating. Webb had a bloody nose from an accidental elbow during a scramble for position, blood running down his face, dripping onto his PT shirt. Bennett was favoring his ribs where he had landed poorly trying to escape from mount position. Each breath visible effort. Morrison was limping on his left ankle from a swept takedown, and his right shoulder was burning. That old injury from Ranger School making itself known. What the spectators could not see, what only Maya herself knew, was that she had identified that shoulder injury early in the exchange. She had watched Morrison favor it, seen him wince when weight went through it, cataloged it as a weakness she could exploit, and she had deliberately chosen not to. Every time she could have attacked that shoulder, could have applied pressure to the injury, she had chosen a different technique instead. Not mercy, professional restraint. She was proving she was better without taking advantage of his vulnerability, demonstrating superiority through pure technical skill rather than exploitation. That is when Morrison's control finally shattered. 4.5 minutes of being dominated by someone he had dismissed as inadequate. 4.5 minutes of his certainties being systematically demolished. 4.5 minutes of watching everything he believed about size and strength prove insufficient against someone who simply knew more, moved better, understood combat at a deeper level. His ego could not absorb it. His worldview could not accommodate it. So he abandoned technique entirely and went to pure aggression. He rushed in, no setup, no strategy, just violence. He drove Maya backward and down, using every pound of his 220 to force her to the ground. He locked a guillotine choke around her neck, that standing headlock that could quickly cut off blood flow if applied correctly, and he cranked it, not progressive resistance, not controlled technique. Maximum force, trying to make her submit through pain and pressure. Maya tapped. 3 clear strikes on his arm, the universal signal to release the submission. He did not release. He squeezed harder, twisting, trying to force her unconscious, trying to prove his point through domination that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with wounded pride. Thorne's voice cut across the training area like a rifle shot. "Morrison! Release! Now! That is a direct order!" Morrison did not hear him, or did not care. The red haze of humiliated rage had taken over, reducing everything to the need to win, to dominate, to prove he was stronger. Maya's survival instincts activated without conscious thought. This was not training anymore. This was a threat, real and immediate, from someone who had lost control. She responded accordingly. Her right leg hooked behind Morrison's left leg, her hips bridged explosively upward, generating force from her core, from her legs, from every muscle in her body working in perfect coordination. She used his overcommitment against him and reversed their positions in a movement so fast the spectators barely tracked it. She transitioned immediately to arm triangle choke, using her arm and Morrison's own shoulder to create the compression, cutting off blood flow to his brain through the carotid arteries. She locked it tight, squeezed with precision and control, applying exactly enough pressure to make the point absolutely clear. Morrison tapped frantically. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Desperate panic tapping against her arm, against the mat, against anything his hand could reach. Maya held it for 2 extra seconds. Not long enough to cause real damage, but long enough to send an unmistakable message. "You did not release me when I tapped. I am choosing to release you. Remember this feeling. Remember what it means to be completely at someone else's mercy." Then she released, rolled away, and came to her feet. Blood marked her lower lip where it had split during the exchange. Bruises were forming on her neck, visible even in the afternoon sun. Dark marks that would last for days. Her face held no expression at all, not anger, not satisfaction, not triumph, just professional composure, the expression of someone who had done what needed to be done. Morrison remained on his hands and knees, coughing violently, one hand at his throat, trying to draw full breaths. His face had gone from red to pale, the color of someone who had just experienced real fear, who had felt what it meant to have another person hold their life in their hands and choose to let them live. For the first time since this whole situation began, Garrett Morrison understood what he had actually challenged. Not a diversity quota, not someone who did not meet standards, but a weapon forged through training he could not imagine. Tested in combat he had never experienced, carrying skills that made his Ranger qualification look like a participation trophy. The realization showed on his face, visible to everyone watching, not just defeat, understanding. That is when the voice cut across the training area, loud and commanding, stopping everyone mid-breath. "Command Sergeant Major Thorne, hold that formation." Brigadier General Robert Sterling strode through the gate with his aide and a JAG officer flanking him. Every soldier in the area snapped to attention so fast it looked choreographed. Sterling was 65 years old, carried himself like someone who had spent decades in command. And when he walked, people moved. When he spoke, people listened. The 2 stars on his collar meant he was one of the most senior officers on the installation, and his reputation meant those stars significantly understated his actual influence. He took his time crossing to the ring, his boots crunching on the red Georgia clay, letting the silence build. When he reached the edge, he surveyed the scene with the expression of someone who had seen exactly what he expected to see and was now deciding what to do about it. "Take a knee," he said. His voice was not loud, did not need to be. It carried absolute authority. The kind that came from 30-plus years of commanding soldiers in the worst places on earth. Everyone complied immediately. Morrison, Webb, and Bennett knelt where they stood. The spectators in the bleachers remained seated but went absolutely still. Maya took a knee with the others, though Sterling's eyes tracked to her specifically for just a moment, some unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Thorne remained standing, as was his right as the senior NCO present, but even he looked uncertain about what was coming. Sterling clasped his hands behind his back and began speaking in a tone that combined disappointment, authority, and something harder to define. "I have been observing this course for 3 weeks," he said. "Received a formal complaint about a soldier allegedly not meeting standards. The complaint was detailed. Professional looking, signed by a Ranger-qualified NCO, so I took it seriously." He paused. "I reviewed training records. I observed multiple sessions. I consulted with subject matter experts who have trained personnel for missions I still cannot discuss in this setting." Another pause. Today's demonstration was particularly educational. His eyes moved across the ring, taking in the blood on the clay, the soldiers still breathing hard, the marks already forming on Maya's neck. "I watched 3 soldiers attempt to overwhelm one opponent using numerical superiority, significant size advantage, and coordinated tactics." His eyes moved to Morrison, then Webb, then Bennett. "I watched them fail comprehensively." The words fell like hammer blows, and then I watched one of those soldiers lose control, ignore the safety rules, attempt to injure his training partner after she had tapped in submission. Morrison's face had gone white. Sterling turned to face the full formation, his voice carrying to every person present. "How many of you know what Operation Sphinx was?" Silence, confused looks, soldiers glancing at each other, trying to determine if this was a test, a trick question, or genuine inquiry. Finally, scattered headshakes. Nobody knew. 18 months ago, Sterling said, the Department of Defense initiated a classified program. The objective was to develop female operators capable of conducting missions in denied environments where male soldiers could not effectively operate. Selection for cultural access, intelligence collection, direct action in contexts that required capabilities the conventional military did not possess. He let that sink in. Watched understanding begin to dawn on faces. Selection standards were equivalent to Special Forces assessment and selection. The training pipeline utilized Tier 1 instructors from across the Special Operations community, Israeli Krav Maga specialists from Sayeret Matkal, Delta Force close quarters battle experts, Ranger qualified medical personnel teaching trauma medicine at the highest level. People were starting to understand where this was going. The noise level dropped to absolute silence. The program operated for 16 months before budget complications and political considerations forced termination. 48 applicants from across the United States Army, infantry soldiers, military police, intelligence specialists, combat medics, all volunteers, all with prior deployment experience. Sterling's voice got quieter, which somehow made it more intense. 12 graduated, 12 out of 48. The rest either quit or were cut for not meeting standards. Those 12 women were then deployed on classified missions across multiple theaters, conducting operations I cannot describe in detail, but which directly contributed to national security objectives and saved American lives. He turned and looked directly at Maya, and now everyone followed his gaze. Captain Maya Blackwood, 8 years of service, infantry, 11 Bravo MOS, deployed to Afghanistan, 2020 through 2021, 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, Kandahar Province, attached to a female engagement team. The formality of his tone made it clear this was official recognition, not casual conversation. In March 2021, her element was ambushed during village operations near the Pakistani border. The interpreter was killed instantly. The team leader, Major Diana Mercer, was hit by RPG fragmentation that severed her femoral artery. He paused. The team medic was pinned by machine gun fire from 2 positions and could not reach the casualty. People were leaning forward now, caught by the story, by the specific details that made it real. Captain Blackwood low-crawled 40 meters through enemy fire using an irrigation ditch for concealment while rounds impacted within inches of her position. She reached Major Mercer, applied a tourniquet while lying prone under fire, and then returned fire with one hand while maintaining direct pressure on the arterial wound site with the other hand, for 9 minutes. Until air support arrived and medevac could land. Sterling paused for emphasis. The field surgeon's after-action report stated that without that tourniquet application and sustained pressure, Major Mercer would have bled out in under 3 minutes. Captain Blackwood's actions under fire, her technical medical skill, and her courage saved her team leader's life long enough for professional intervention. The weight of that settled over the formation, like a physical presence. Based on that combat performance, Captain Blackwood was selected for Operation Sphinx. She completed the 8-month training pipeline and graduated 4th in her class of 12. Hand-to-hand combat proficiency rated at Special Operations Standard. Instructor certifications in 3 separate martial arts disciplines. Performance evaluations from instructors with more combined combat experience than everyone in this formation, including myself, rated her as exceptionally gifted in close-quarters combat. Sterling's voice dropped to almost a whisper, which made every word cut deeper. So tell me, Staff Sergeant Morrison. He turned to face the man still kneeling on the clay. After watching what just occurred, after attempting to choke her unconscious when she tapped, after she could have broken your arm, dislocated your shoulder, that shoulder you injured at Ranger School, or rendered you unconscious, but chose not to. Morrison flinched at the mention of his shoulder injury, the one he thought he had hidden so well. After she demonstrated technical superiority against 3 opponents simultaneously, Sterling leaned forward slightly. Do you still believe Captain Blackwood does not meet standards? Morrison could not speak. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. What could he possibly say? Every assumption he had made had been proven wrong. Every certainty had been shattered. He had challenged someone who operated at a level he could not comprehend, and she had made it look easy. Sterling let the silence hang for a long moment, then continued. I was Operation Sphinx's military advocate at the Pentagon. I fought to keep that program alive when political winds shifted against it. I lost that battle. Budget constraints, political considerations, concerns about public perception. The program was terminated, its records sanitized, the 12 graduates scattered back to conventional assignments. His expression hardened. But I made damn sure those 12 women were protected. I made sure their service records were flagged appropriately. I made sure they had advocates if institutional resistance emerged, and I have been waiting to see if any of them would step forward, to teach, to pass on what they learned, to continue the legacy even though the program officially never existed. He looked at Maya with visible respect. Captain Blackwood is the first. She volunteered for this instructor course not because she is running from her past, but because she is weaponizing it. She is here to teach the next generation of soldiers what she learned in places I cannot name, doing things I cannot describe, at a level most of you will never reach. Sterling turned back to the full formation. The United States Army is better for having soldiers like Captain Blackwood, soldiers who have proven themselves in combat, soldiers who have completed training that most male soldiers could not pass, soldiers who understand that capability has no gender requirement, that competence is demonstrated through performance, and that the warrior ethos transcends any demographic category. He let that settle, then delivered the consequences. I am directing the following actions. His voice became pure command, official and final. Staff Sergeant Morrison, you will receive a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand for training safety violations. You will be reassigned to Fort Cavazos, Texas, pending a formal investigation. You are removed from this course effective immediately. Morrison's face went gray. His career was over. A go-more was career-ending for an NCO. He would never be promoted again. Would likely be forced out at his current rank. Sergeant Webb, you will receive a written counseling statement and mandatory professional military education retraining. You will continue in this course under probationary status. Webb nodded mutely, understanding he had been given a second chance he did not deserve. Specialist Bennett, you are removed from this course and returned to your basic unit. Given your age and the influence of senior personnel in this situation, you will not face additional disciplinary action. Learn from this. Bennett's relief was visible, mixed with shame. Sterling addressed the full formation a final time. Everyone here witnessed something important today. You witnessed what happens when assumption meets reality, when prejudice meets performance. When someone who has been underestimated demonstrates exactly why that underestimation was a mistake. His eyes swept across every face. Remember this. Learn from it. And understand that the military is changing, must change, will change, regardless of anyone's personal comfort with that change. He straightened, dismissed. The formation broke. Soldiers moved away in clusters, talking in low voices, processing what they had witnessed. Many of them looked back at Maya with expressions ranging from respect to awe to confusion. 5 days later, the official actions came through exactly as Sterling had promised. Morrison received his go-more and orders to Fort Cavazos. Webb and Bennett received their counseling and continued with their assignments, both noticeably quieter, notably more professional. Maya continued the instructor course. She trained, she taught, she demonstrated, she helped other students improve. Nobody made comments about diversity anymore. Nobody questioned whether she belonged. The dragon tattoo on her wrist became something people noticed and wondered about but did not ask about directly. Command Sergeant Major Thorne found her 2 days after the incident, standing near the training area, watching a new class run through basic grappling progressions. He approached with the careful respect of someone who had learned something important. "Captain," he said, "I owe you an apology. I should have stopped it sooner. Should have protected you better." Maya looked at him steadily. "You could not have stopped it, Sergeant Major. Not really. Even if you denied this specific match, the attitude would have remained. The belief that I do not belong. That standards were lowered. This was not about one training evolution. It was about a lesson that needed to be taught. Still, I should have done better. You approved it with safety measures. You were ready to intervene. You did your job. And now everyone who watched learned something they would not have learned any other way." Thorne studied her face. "Gulf War taught me a lot of lessons," he said slowly. "One of them was that women are force multipliers in ways the conventional military did not want to acknowledge. Took us decades to start catching up to that reality." He extended his hand. "Keep teaching, Captain. We need it." Maya shook his hand. "I intend to, Sergeant Major." The following Monday, Maya stood in front of a formation of 28 soldiers beginning their Level 4 combative certification. She did not mention what had happened, did not reference her background, did not explain the dragon tattoo. She simply demonstrated a technique, a basic hip throw from collar-tie position, broke it down into components, and asked for volunteers to practice. Specialist Derek Holloway stepped forward first, the young soldier who had warned her about Morrison's plans, then a staff sergeant who had been in the audience during the match, then 2 more. Then the entire class was engaged, asking questions, taking notes, treating her exactly like what she was, an expert teaching her craft. After class, Holloway approached. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "is it true what General Sterling said about Operation Sphinx, about the training, all of it?" Maya considered the question, then rolled up her sleeve just enough to show the small dragon tattoo. "The program does not exist anymore," she said. "Officially, it never existed at all, but what it taught us, what we learned, that does not disappear when paperwork gets destroyed. Skills do not vanish when institutions fail." She lowered her sleeve. "You want to learn what I can teach? I will teach you. Not because you are special, because you are willing to work." Holloway nodded, something like understanding in his expression. "My uncle always said the military would be better when it figured out how to use all its warriors properly. I think he was right." He was, and I intend to prove it. Every day I stand in front of a class. That evening, Maya's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She recognized the protocol immediately. 11 sisters watching. We saw what you did. General Sterling made sure we knew. The dragon legacy continues through you. Proud does not cover it. Denver next month, all 12. Time to discuss our future. It was signed simply. Viper, Catherine Vance, their training officer, their advocate. Still protecting them from the shadows. Still maintaining the network. Still ensuring the sisterhood endured. Maya typed a response. "I will be there." She signed it with her own call sign, Reaper. Then she called her father. Thomas Blackwood answered on the second ring. "Maya, I heard what happened. News travels fast when you know the right people. Then you know how it ended. I know you taught them a lesson they will never forget, the way we taught you." Maya smiled for the first time in days. "Everything you gave me, Dad, you and Gunny and Chief and the Colonel, all those years in the garage, all those weekends at the range, all those stories about the old wars, it all came together. That is what we hoped for. That is why we invested all those years. I know that now." There was silence for a moment, the comfortable silence of family. "Your mother would be proud, Maya. God rest her soul. She would have loved to see what you have become. I wish she could have. She is watching, I believe that, and she is proud. Dad? Yes? Thank you for everything, for believing I could be something more, for never letting me quit, for teaching me that warriors are measured by what they do, not what people expect them to be. You did the work, Maya. We just showed you the path. I love you, Dad. I love you too. Now get some rest. You have soldiers to train tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Maya hung up. She walked to her wall locker and picked up the 2 sets of dog tags. Mercer's and Reeves's. The women who had believed in her, who had trained beside her, who had died believing this work mattered. "I did it," she said quietly. "I taught them the lesson, and I will keep teaching. For you, for all of us, for everyone who comes after." She placed the dog tags carefully back on the locker. Then she stood by the window, looking out at the Georgia night. Somewhere out there, 11 other women carried the same mark, the same memories, the same mission. Somewhere in Seattle, an old Marine was probably sitting in his garage, surrounded by the ghosts of his own war, smiling because his daughter had become everything he raised her to be. The dragon tattoo caught the light from the window, small, permanent, undeniable. They said she was too small to be a real threat. They were wrong, and now the whole world knew it. Maya turned off the light. Tomorrow she would wake before dawn. Tomorrow she would stand in front of another class. Tomorrow she would teach another generation of soldiers that size and strength were not the only measures of a warrior. The program was gone, but she remained. The sisterhood was scattered, but they endured, and the legacy would continue. One student at a time, one lesson at a time, one day at a time, until the flame she carried had been passed to so many hands that it could never be extinguished. That was what warriors did. They fought, they taught, they endured, and they made sure the next generation was ready for whatever battles lay ahead. Maya Blackwood closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she slept without dreams. The dragon had awakened, the lesson had been taught, and tomorrow, the work would continue.